Recording in progress.
Hello. Dr. Murray, are you there?
I am here.
Thank you. All right, almost start. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have Donna come up to the front and then do the intro for a couple of minutes, and then we pass it on to the webinar platform to you, okay?
Great, wonderful.
All right, about to get it started in a second.
Okay.
Welcome to today's webinar hosted by eLotus and sponsored by Evergreen Herbs, your trusted source for quality CEU content. With over 20 years of experience in providing educational courses, we aim to enhance your knowledge and expand your skill set. I'm Donna Chow, your host and moderator for today's webinar. Our goal for this session is to present modern practice, modern solutions, herbal success without writing formulas with Dr. Carrie Murphy. We recognize that Chinese herbal medicine often doesn't receive the attention it deserves in TCM healthcare. So webinars like this are crucial for helping both experienced herbal professionals refine their skills and beginners to embark on their professional journey. Today's webinar brings together 3 distinct groups of participants. The first one is our Watch It Free group. Our attendees have complimentary access to the webinar. Our second group who paid for the webinar can earn CEU credits in addition to joining us for today's class. And finally, our third group is our Gold Pass members who can enjoy full access to our live webinars, distant learning courses, and a library of over 3,000 hours of clinically relevant content. Gold Pass membership is valid for 1 year and includes a gift voucher from Evergreen Herbs. For today's special offer, we are providing the Gold Pass at $999. Along with a $9.99 gift voucher for Evergreen's premium collection line formulas. All participants today, regardless of your group, you all have free access to today's webinar recording for a whole month, while Gold Pass members will retain access as long as they are members, making it a valuable resource for continuous learning and patient care. Before we get started for the class, let's go ahead and ensure that we have an engaging and informative session. Please do this right now and set your chat preference to everyone so that everyone can see what you're writing and be part of the conversation. If you have any questions for Dr. Murphy, please type them directly to the Q&A box so that she can see it. Then after the webinar, there will be a quiz available the following workday, and you'll receive an email when that's available. Today's class will run from 8 to 5 p.m. with 4 breaks in between, and lunch is scheduled from 12 to 1 p.m. Okay, so our speaker today is Dr. Carrie Murphy, a doctor of acupuncture and Chinese medicine in Milwaukee's historic 3rd Ward. Dr. Murphy specializes in integrative internal medicine, primarily working with patients who are also undergoing Western medical treatment. Her main focus is to help patients maximize their vitality while minimizing the number of medications and surgeries they have to undergo. Dr. Murphy has an impressive background, having been on the faculty at Pacific College of Health and Science for 8 years. During her tenure, she served as chair of the Department of Herbal Medicine, taught integrative oncology and integrative endocrinology, and created and supervised a student acupuncture clinic at Chicago Women's Health Center. With that introduction, let's begin today's webinar and learn something new. Dr. Murphy, we are excited to see what you have in store for us, and we invite you to share your presentation. Let's get started.
Thank you so much, Donna. What a great introduction. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for saying hi in the chat. Make sure your chat preference is set to everyone. There are a lot of us here today, so I'm not going to be able to keep an eye on the chat, but Donna will. If you have questions, you can put them in the Q&A box and those will pop up. But I do welcome people to have an active chat. I think it's really fun for you. And that way too, if I say an herb name or formula name that you're not familiar with, you can say, hey, did anyone catch that? Maybe one of your peers will be able to grab it for you. If I start talking too fast, please put like sad face emojis in the chat. If you're with me, if you know what I'm talking about, you can put some happy faces in the chat just so I can kind of keep an eye on you guys and make sure things are going well for you. Let me share my screen here so that you can see this awesome keynote. Okay. All right. So Donna, are you there?
Yeah, we are here.
Okay. I am not seeing my share here.
Yeah. Do you which the note? What's it called? Are you using the Mac, right? Mac PowerPoint player.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know where? Do you have it in your computer or no? Do you have it on?
Yeah, it's on my desktop.
Okay. Is it already you opened up already?
Let me get that. Sorry, everybody. Take a sip of coffee. I know you West Coasters are at the beginning of a day here. Okay. There we go. Okay, now that's all right.
All right. Sound looking good.
Okay, are we looking at a slide? This is what is your why?
Yeah. Were you able to make it like full screen from your side? Right now, we're still seeing your background and then your test bar on the bottom.
Okay. All right.
I think last time there was a meeting. I mean, maximize the keynote.
We maximize it in keynote. Okay.
Right there.
In settings?
No, it's on the Donna Murphy right there. Can you exit out of that menu? Okay, I think one of the green or the yellow button will give you the maximizer.
Well, you're looking at what I'm looking at, right?
Yeah, that little three color on the left.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I think one of
The
them. Yeah, the
green
green one, I believe.
Oh, hey everybody! I
that
just
worked.
learned a new thing. Okay,
Yeah, that looked good.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Well, again, thanks, Donna, for the introduction. I wanted to mention also that I'm celebrating 20 years in clinical practice this month, which feels like a wonderful milestone. I'm very happy to be here talking with all of you. And I was reading some of your shares in the chat as we were getting started and really thinking about when we're busy at work and we have an active practice and we want to do as much as we can for everyone. How do we do it? How do we do it? So we have to really look at our time commitment and our patient's time commitment. And very often what happens is we learned in school that we need to write a patent form, that we need to write a formula for every patient that we see. And oftentimes we don't have time to do that, and we don't have the space to do it. I know in my practice, I don't have a big extra room for a full herb pharmacy. And my patients don't have the time and the energy. I'm in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. We don't necessarily have the time and the energy to double boil some Chinese herbs every day. And oftentimes people don't need to. So one of the things that I really want to talk about is why patents. Some of us got overwhelmed in school trying to learn herbs because there's so many herbs and we have all these patients and they have all these problems and there are all these herbs, and acupuncture is simpler. We take a look at acupuncture and we say, you know, this patient has knee pain. We put a needle in the knee, we put a needle down the channel. It's not a hard thing to do. But with herbs, we can really get intimidated. So one of the great things about patents is compliance. the first thing that we really want to think about is the best herb formula for a patient is the one that they take and the one that they take every day. So when we're looking at a busy, let's say, working mom with terrible periods, one of the really difficult things is, when is she going to make these herb formulas? She's not going to. She's sick of cooking. She's not going to make extra stuff. If you can throw a bottle of herbs in your purse, and you can have a bottle of herbs on your desk at work, and you can have a bottle of herbs next to your coffee maker, that's going to really work a lot better. Okay, opening the chat back up here. I just want to be able to see how you guys are doing. Second, I was the chair of the Department of Herbal Medicine at Pacific College for 8 years. And I did teach a lot of herbs classes there. But I'm not an herb genius. I'm just a regular person. But Zhang Zhongjing was an herb genius. Sun Sim Ya was an herb genius. So we have these formulas that were already written, and they're very close to perfect. A lot of the herb formulas that we use are kind of unimprovable upon. And so in school, we learn these are guiding formulas and we should customize them for every patient. And there's a lot of beauty in that. And I am not here to put down writing a formula for a patient. But what I've found is the formulas as they already exist are close enough for 99.9% of my patients. And then for the other 0.1% of patients, we can order a custom formula. And there are a lot of places where you can do that. Like I use Camwo herbs in New York. And Camwo is really nice because you can write a custom formula and they'll make it into vacuum packs and ship it to the patient. So very unusually, I will do that for someone. But what I've really found is the formulas as they already exist provide convenience for us and for our patients, and they provide compliance, and they provide genius, and they're time tested. So I can throw Huan Pi in there with the best of them, but to be able to use a formula that we really know what's going to happen with it. We know if somebody comes back with a headache, we can say, oh, that was the Huang Qi, or that was the Chai Hu. We know how we can balance that out. And I'll talk about that a little bit as we go along. Okay. Another thing that I really like is a patent formula, which is to say a formula that's already made in a capsule, in a bottle, or in granules. I do use a lot of evergreen granules as well. They force a kind of focus and prioritization. So I don't know if you have ever had this situation. I don't know if you've had this situation this week, but you have a patient come in with sort of something wrong on every level. They're exhausted, they're fried, they aren't sleeping well, they have brain fog, their diet is totally off and they cannot seem to get their diet right. They have back pain, they have neck pain, they're not exercising, they're low energy. And you kind of go, if I wrote a formula for this person, it would just have every herb in the Materia Medica. So when you have to choose a formula, you're choosing a focus and you're choosing a priority. And that's something that can really help us to be precise. And this is something that one of my teachers talked about a lot, which I really carry with me, that doing one thing at a time, not one, but doing something that's a little bit coherent. So choosing to say, I'm gonna tonify the spleen, qi, I'm gonna nourish heart, blood. That's what I'm gonna do. I'm not gonna do everything. I'm not gonna also drain damp and transform phlegm and scatter cold and all the things. Yeah, this person needs all of those things, but when we try to do everything at the same time, we end up with a very weak effect. And when we really put our money down, on one place, we can really start to get some results happening. This makes me think about early in my practice, I had a patient come in and I was working in Chicago then, and she was a classic Midwestern patient, very damp, really bad allergies. She had PCOS. She had really loose, sticky stool. She had low energy. She had cravings for cheese. She just wanted to eat cheese and bread and rest and lie around. And she felt terrible all the time. Her periods were way off. And she had insomnia. And I was a junior practitioner. And I thought, well, all that other stuff goes in the category of spleen deficiency and dampness. All the other stuff, I've got her. Phlegm, I've got it. I totally get this case. But insomnia made no sense to me. I didn't see any blood deficiency signs. I couldn't, yin deficiency, no, she was like 22 years old and very damp. And so I said to her, listen, everything about your case makes sense to me, except for the insomnia. So let me just treat everything else and we'll put a pin in the insomnia and come back to it. So I gave her a great treatment. I sent her home with, I think, Shangsha Liu Zhenzitang, which, as we all know, not an insomnia formula. And she came back the next week laughing. And I said, what are you laughing about? And she said, I slept every night this week. No other changes. My phlegm is still the same. My allergies are still the same. Everything else is still the same, but I got amazing night's sleep every night this week. And so that also shows us that sometimes when you really get right in, like a really deficient spleen case, a deficient spleen can cause problems in every system. And to just say, like, I'm not going to go trying to run around and address every part of this case on the first day, you can actually start to get things done in a real way. And then from our perspective, it's a manageable overhead. Any of you on this call who are herbalists, if you don't do the gold pass, do the gold pass. It's kind of a no-brainer because you are going to spend $1,000 on evergreen herbs this year anyway. So you might as well get all these free CEUs. It's such a great service. I use it. It's where I get my CEUs. So welcome. It's a Sunday morning. It is difficult to get our heads in the space to do this on a Sunday morning. So wherever you are, let's just take 3 attuning breaths together so that we can dive into this because we've got some business to do today. All right. So get a straight spine, get comfortable in your chair for just a moment. We're going to take 3 deep breaths. Good. Now I know we have attendees from at least 4 time zones. So now we're all here in the same breath space, even though we're not at all at the same time. Now that we're a little attuned, I want you to bring in for yourself into this room. Hi, Gary. It's okay that you're running late. Why you got into Chinese medicine in the first place and why you want to get better at herbs. There is a Buddhist vow, the Bodhisattva vow, and part of it states, may I be the doctor and the medicine. So we want to be, not just with our knowledge, but with our presence, a deep offering to our patients. And when you study all day long on a Sunday, when you take your whole Sunday to think about herbs and think about your patients, whether you have 15 years of experience or 5 years of experience or 5 minutes of experience, we're dedicating this to our patient's well-being and the patient who you will see this week and the patient who you will see next year and the patient who you will see in 10 years. So there is somebody who's out there waiting for you to have a realization that you're going to have today, or maybe learn a little something that you're going to learn today. Okay. All right. So I want to know, I'm sure everybody didn't go to Pacific. I know how we taught it at Pacific, and I know how I learned it at Pacific. But I'd love for you, pop it in the chat. How does Chinese medicine work? A patient comes into our office, and how do we make a decision? What's the kind of concept of Chinese medical diagnostics? From the pattern, yeah. Thomas, make sure you're set to everyone. We diagnose patterns, right? Via the 8 principles. Very good. Differential diagnosis. Checking tongue and pulses. What does that bring up for you? Do we only check tongue and pulses? How do we diagnose? Asking, listening. right? Smelling. I don't think many of us do the tasting pillar anymore, the intake. Yeah. Okay. All right. So the TCM framework, the patient comes in, signs and symptoms. They tell us what's going on. They tell us their story. And I want to say there's some research that the average patient gets interrupted by their doctor 13 seconds in to presenting their case, which is painful. I think we could really look at not being that doctor. So think about when your patient comes in and you say, what can I do for you today? Tell me what's going on. See if you can give them a whole minute or 3 whole minutes. It's a long time, 3 minutes. If I stopped and was silent now for 3 minutes, you'd be like, oh my gosh, this is forever. 3 minutes of dead air is a lot. And let them tell you the whole story and don't interrupt. You know, if you have questions, you can hold the questions for a minute or 2 minutes and let them really talk you all the way through. Because very often, if we let our patients talk, and not everybody has 3 minutes in them, but if we let our patients talk, they'll tell us everything that we need to know without us having to ask and interrupt and inquire. But what about this and what about that? I'm all for that. And I think we should be asking, we must ask those questions, but giving people a couple of minutes at the beginning, because also one of the biggest sources of anxiety for any patient in a health situation is talking to the doctor and having to present their case again. And what if I'm not heard? What if I'm shamed for what I have to say? What if I, you know, and particularly in Chinese medicine, we're looking for stuff that they can't see about themselves. When you look at a patient's tongue, you can see something about them that they can't see about themselves. It's extremely vulnerable. So really being aware that we're taking that patient in and we're holding them in a safe place and we're inviting them to be really vulnerable with us and really show us what's going on so that we can diagnose, whether we're diagnosing a pathomechanism or a pattern. Over the years, I used to be much bigger on diagnosis, and now I'm much bigger on pathomechanism. And it's a subtle point, but when we say to a patient, oh, you have blood stasis, you have Qi deficiency, it's a little bit of a judgment and it's a little bit of a determination. And oftentimes what I like to do is say, I think that these signs and symptoms that you're experiencing are arising from a bit of dysfunction where the spleen isn't nourishing the heart, the blood isn't being generated, the kidneys aren't showing up as much as we want them to for work. So our strategy is going to be that we are going to nourish the spleen to get that all moving and rolling again. It's got a little bit more growth mindset to it. It's got a little bit more sense of not the finality of a diagnosis, but just a sense of a strategy. What's the treatment strategy that we have? And really something that I witness with my patients all the time is they go to different doctors. In Milwaukee, acupuncture and Chinese medicine are not the first thing that people think of very often. So oftentimes my patients will come in and they've already seen 8 or 9 different doctors and they're very frustrated because doctors say, well, there's nothing on your test is clear, your MRI is clear, whatever is clear. So you're fine. And do you want some anxiety medication? And they're not fine. They just have a clear test result, but they're suffering from something. And so a diagnosis without a strategy isn't really so helpful. What patients really want is to be received, to be seen and heard, and then for you to say, I know how to start addressing this. I think I know how to intervene. That's the classic TCM framework. And what I just want to add in for today is the cause. What are the causes of the pathomechanism? What are the causes of the disharmony? So what I want us to be thinking about all throughout this day as we're talking is the patient has their symptoms, we come up with a diagnosis or pathomechanism, we look at the cause. What is causing this problem before we start thinking of treatment strategies? And then from our treatment strategy arises the intervention. And the intervention is what we're going to do about it. So for an example, put this in the chat. It really helps me because I can't see all of your faces. So I'm like alone in a room right now. It helps me if you post something in the chat. What are some causes of back pain? Poor posture, right? Kidney deficiency, blood stasis, injury. Yeah, what else? I'm thinking of the biggest one. Overuse, mechanical alignment, weak glutes. That's a big one, right? Okay, now arise out of your too much sitting. Kellen, you got it. That's what I was going for. Emotional heaviness. Stagnation on many levels from joint to chi. Beautiful. Exactly. In the United States, right? We studied Chinese medicine. And I used to think about this a lot when I was in school. This medicine was written for people who were not sitting at a desk all day. This medicine was for people, yeah, lifestyle, right? This was for people who maybe were farmers, you know, who had some toil and had some movement in their lives. And now the number one cause of back pain that I see in my office is sitting in a chair all day. But it can also be an injury, an accident. One of the things that I look at mechanically whenever I have a back pain patient is tight hamstrings and a weak core. You know, if you've got weak abs, tight hamstrings, you might get tight glutes, tight psoas, tight piriformis. So the back and the sides are all locked up and the front is very like empty, you know. So thinking about what are the mechanics of it? Are we setting up a body that can function without pain? A bad mattress. Are you sleeping on your futon from college? A bad office chair, any chair, too much. And let's remember hating your life. What if you are stuck in your life and you hate your career, you hate your marriage, you wish you didn't live in, you know, wherever. And then, of course, also certainly weak kidneys, stuck chi. And if we have time at the end, I'm going to talk at the end of the day a little bit about second chakra dysfunction and all the chakras, because Ayurvedic energy body, the chakra system, and the channels of Ayurveda have a lot of resonance with what we do in Chinese medicine. And sometimes if you overlay the chakra map on top of the channel map, certain patients of yours will start to make a lot more sense. Okay, so we've got our causes. And we have to look at lifestyle. There's no way for us to work with, for example, back pain without thinking about the causes, which one of the causes, and this is holistic medicine. This is Chinese medicine. Chinese medicine doesn't start getting into acupuncture and herbs unless all this other stuff is right, you know? So we want to look at the body-mind connection. How is stress sitting in the body? When I was, okay, I'm just going to say, when I was working at Pacific College, I was a student at Pacific College, New York. I started treating all these people who worked in the front office for neck pain. They all had neck pain. Like I was seeing 5 people in the front office for neck pain. And I started thinking, what on earth is going on in that office? So I did a site visit. I went up to the front desk and I said, I need to take a look at, you know, the administrative offices here on behalf of a patient. They let me in, which I think is really crazy in retrospect. But I walked around the office and they had terrible feng shui. Everybody's desk was facing away from the door. And many of them, they're like looking out the window, which is really nice from the perspective of having a view. But what I witnessed was their boss would walk around and silently walk into their office behind them and look over their desk at their computer to see what they were doing. And then be like, why are you doing that? Why are you working on that? That's not spelled that way. That's not spelled that way. So they were all like, oh, so stressed out from having somebody sneaking up on them over their shoulder. So the first thing I did with that batch of patients was ask them to turn their desks around. So when I could have been treating neck pain for those people, I could still be treating them for neck pain if we hadn't recognized that there was something going on in their life at work that was causing the problem. Does that mean that if they couldn't turn their desks, I couldn't do acupuncture? Of course not. So really looking at what's happening for you in your life and what's happening for you at work. If you're feeling really stuck and really miserable in your life, it's going to start to show up in your body. This is sort of the core concept of 5-element theory. It's the core concept of Chinese medical theory. If you are frustrated and you are not speaking your words and you are not able to express yourself, your gallbladder is going to start locking down. It's going to be in your jaw, your shoulder, your rib cage, your hips, your IT bands are going to be tight. Your lateral knee is going to be out. You're going to be twisting your ankle all the time. And we see these patients, they come in and they're like, oh man, I'm falling apart. Like, I think I'm dying. I don't know what's wrong with me. I've got TMJ, neck pain, jaw pain. I've got rib side thing. I got shingles last week. I have a tight piriformis and I can't do this. And I sprained my ankle and blah, blah, blah. And to us, we're like, yeah, the gallbladder. Are you frustrated at work? And they go like, oh my gosh, you're psychic. But we're not psychic. We can just read this incredible map that has been made for us and taught to us. Take a moment, honor our teachers and all the teachers in the lineage who have kept this medicine alive and taught it to the next generation and taught it to all of us. So let's remember our beloved teachers. So we want to do some stress management techniques. So we want to maybe teach a little meditation. Does anybody teach meditation to their patients? I'm going to teach you guys a 1-minute meditation right now that Shannon taught me. Hi, Shannon. Thanks for being here. Does anybody feel like ready to do a 1-minute meditation? Okay, this is called the 333 meditation. I'm going to type it in the chat. We're going to take 3 deep breaths. We've already done this once today, but we're going to keep breathing in a repetitive way throughout this whole day. We're going to breathe. Okay, 3 deep breaths. And open your eyes if they were closed. Notice the brightest color in the room you're in. What does it smell like here? And one sound. And 3 deep breaths. You know, what's great about that meditation is that you can keep your eyes open the whole time. You can do it in a meeting. You can do it while you're driving. You can do it if you're about to give a presentation, someone's introducing you. There are very few times when you don't have a minute or two to breathe and ground into the present moment using your senses. And you can teach that to your patients too. And it's nice because it doesn't, it's not a meditation that's going to interfere with anyone's spiritual or religious beliefs. If they have a certain belief, that's just counting and looking, you know. So I live and work in a place that's heavily Christian, and there are people in my practice who don't know that meditation is part of the Christian tradition as well. And they have heard that maybe it's not something Christians are allowed to do. So I like to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to breathe a little bit and to notice where they are a little bit. Yoga and Qigong, anything that you can teach your patient, a little stretch, or even just to roll their neck, you know, to set an alarm once an hour at work and just do a few twists in your chair so that you're not calcifying all day long at work, all week long, all month long, and then thinking you're going to come in once a week for acupuncture and I'm going to be able to reverse all of that. A couple of other lifestyle things that I want to bring forward. One is nutrition. If somebody has celiac disease, we're probably not going to be able to use herbs and acupuncture to make them able to digest gluten. If they're gluten intolerant, we might be able to work with it. If somebody has, gluten is a real big issue. It's up in my mind right now because I'm treating a lot of patients with Hashimoto's thyroiditis And I'm treating a lot of patients with rheumatoid arthritis and with lupus. And when you start getting into these autoimmune diseases, one of the things that we really find is gluten can be really bad fuel to that fire. So we want to make sure that people are doing as much as they can, doing as well as they can, to not just eat whatever, there are so many trends in health. And in Chinese medicine, we should lightly laugh about trends in health, because we should be aware that depending on somebody's constitutional type and depending on what kind of disharmony they have going, there's not going to be one healthy way for everyone to eat. The closest is probably Michael Pollan's food rules, which is eat food, not too much, mostly vegetables. That's right for just about everybody. Mediterranean diet tends to be right for everyone, but there are grains in Mediterranean diet which aren't right for everyone. There's fish in the Mediterranean diet, and eating meat and fish isn't for everyone spiritually. So there's so many things that go into what makes a correct and proper diet for someone. And we really want to be mindful of that and not just saying, okay, yeah, diet is not one size fits all. We're certainly not from the Chinese medical standpoint. I remember 8 years ago, I was doing a training with some colleagues, and somebody was teaching us about alternate fasting. And I said, okay, so with this fasting, an alternate day fasting, what do we do with a woman's menstrual cycle? Are there weeks in the cycle when we don't want to be fasting and weeks in the cycle that are best for fasting? And the guy was like, oh no, that doesn't pertain. Alternate fasting is great for everybody, all ages, all shapes, all types. And I was like, excuse me, are you a doctor of Chinese medicine? Because I think that we should recognize that alternate day fasting is maybe not appropriate for someone with raging liver and kidney yin shu with yang rising, depriving daily, hourly essence, post-heaven essence is not going to be the best fit. Not to mention that for the millions of Americans with disordered eating and history of anorexia, orthorexia, it can be really triggering to have those conversations. So just being really conscious about not trying to make everybody paleo. Although for some people that will be the amazing chef's kiss thing for their case. Okay. And just to touch in a little bit, nutrition does not equal weight loss. I see a lot in my practice that people equate a healthy diet with a weight loss diet, which is not necessarily the case. It can be, but it isn't necessarily. Not everybody is going to have the same body, and not everyone is going to be at the same weight. And I had a patient in just this week who she's going through perimenopause. She just graduated from grad school. She has had a little bit of weight gain, but she's certainly not anyone you would think of as being like, oh no, she has a health problem. And she said, and I'm really overweight and I know I need to lose weight. And I said, are you really overweight? And she said, well, I just don't feel good and I don't feel comfortable in my body. And I said, is this a health issue or a fashion issue? We can work with self-esteem if that's what the issue is. We can work with making sure you have a healthy diet. But when she told me her diet, it was really healthy. And when I looked at her blood test, her cholesterol was like 160 and her, heart rate, resting heart rate was great. And all the metrics that you would look at, her blood glucose was great. She exercises 5 times a week. So really making sure that we're not being pant size Nazis, and that we're taking our patients for who they are. It's not to say weight isn't an issue if someone is at the extreme high or the extreme low, but really noticing the difference between cultural norms and what's expected of how someone looks and someone's health, which are not the same thing at all. Obviously, there are a couple of things that we can look at: sugar, alcohol, caffeine. You guys know all of that. And I wanted to just mention sleep hygiene. Whenever we're working with somebody who has insomnia, my favorite insomnia case of my life was this young woman who came in and out of nowhere, she developed insomnia and she was having terrible nightmares, and she hadn't changed anything in her life at all, hadn't changed work, life, house, diet, no new stressors. Everything was going fine. And we went through the 10 questions and then the 10,000 questions. And finally, I was just at the end. I couldn't think of anything that was going on. And I said, you know, what's the nature of these nightmares? And she said, zombies. And I said, zombies? And she said, yeah, I'm having nightmares about zombies. Florence, you're still beautiful. I'm sure I can't see you, but if you were beautiful in the Renaissance, you're beautiful now. So she said, zombies. And I said, have you by any chance been binge watching The Walking Dead before bed? And she went, oh no. So she had been, and I'm not making fun of her. We have all done this, but she had been scaring the daylights out of herself watching zombie movies before bed, and then closing her computer and closing her eyes and going to sleep and having zombie nightmares and then not being able to get back to sleep. So this really wasn't a heart blood issue. Could a doctor give her Ambien for her insomnia? Sure. Could we give her Swanza-Renton for her insomnia? Yes. But is that really what's needed in this case? Or do we need to look at sleep hygiene? So sleep hygiene is first, you know, no zombie movies before bed. Second, energetically, really thinking about taking your phone into the kitchen at an hour, like 9 p.m., and turning it off and plugging it in to charge for the night and checking it again when you get up and get out of bed and come downstairs at 7 the next morning. Taking 10-hour breaks from your phone or 12-hour breaks from your phone, not going to bed with a phone beaming into your third eye, information, all the information in the world, and everyone's opinion about everyone's opinion about every information in the world. Taking the phone away and plugging it in a different room, even on a different floor. I plug my phone in downstairs before I go to bed. And it's just not in the room with me when I'm sleeping and dreaming and thinking. So it gives me a little rest. And if I wake up and I'm restless in the night, or I wake up real early in the morning, I don't just immediately pick up the phone. I look out the window, I look at the sky, I count sheep, I meditate, I put my body into Shavasana, I rest. You get 80% of your rest from physically resting your body in sleep. So I make sure that I get that rest. So major part of sleep hygiene is not using devices of any kind after a certain hour, like 9 p.m. No TVs, no screens, no nothing. And picking up a book and reading some text, preferably something boring, maybe something you've already read before, that's going to quiet the mind and let your forehead rest and not have all this light beaming on it. That's what we really want. Okay. No coffee afternoon, no chocolate at night, no sugar at night. And sugar is going to be a big thing that will come up again when we start talking about perimenopause. And then I want to talk about the other part of sleep hygiene, which is cortisol. Cortisol is the hormone that when our adrenaline spikes throughout the day, like we see, oh my gosh, I have a notification on my phone, something pinged, something dinged. We get a little burst of adrenaline, a tiny one. And then sometimes we hear a crash and we get a huge burst of adrenaline. We run over, or someone yells, what the hell, or why aren't you on your webinar, you're late, or whatever. You know, you get a big burst of adrenaline and then you think, oh my gosh, and then you type, and then you fix it. And you're like, okay, good. But your body doesn't know that the typing fixed the adrenaline problem, because our adrenaline in history has been when there was an actual crisis, like a bear came out of the bushes and came at us, or a bison pinned us to the ground, or there was a tiger. And so we got that big freak out. If we don't clear it from our body, the adrenal cortex will start pumping cortisol. And that cortisol is meant to keep the adrenaline in the bloodstream. And that adrenaline and cortisol in the bloodstream in a prolonged way all day, every day. And every time you get one of those little red email notifications, it's another little ping of adrenaline, another. And you get a little bit more cortisol coming in to be helpful. And the way that we want to reset that, why we want to reset it, is you will wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning like this, if you haven't reset your cortisol. And then your brain is going and you can't fall back to sleep. So raise your hand if you are someone, or if you treat someone, I can't see you, but just raise your hand, who wakes up at 3 o'clock in the morning in a panic. That is a cortisol thing, because at 3 o'clock in the morning, think of our yin and yang cycle. Midnight, right? We're at absolute yin, midnight. We're totally dead asleep. 3 a.m., that's 3 hours of yang rising within yin. The cortisol levels are starting to rise. If your cortisol levels are rising from 0, then you'll start to stir a little bit. Somewhere in the back of your mind, you start thinking, it might be morning soon. If your cortisol levels are here because you didn't reset them, they'll rise like this, and suddenly it's noon. Have you ever had a patient wake up in the middle of the night and be like, it's not that I'm panicking, but I just feel like it's the middle of the day. Like I'm wide awake and I just get up because I can't sleep anymore. That's cortisol. So the ways that we clear cortisol, that we don't get stuck in a cortisol cycle, are jumping jacks, twisting, vigorous twisting. One song dance party can really be helpful because you need to sort of twist your adrenals and move them. You can do punching, you can do qigong, you can do cross-country skiing, anything that like gives you some movement. Walk a mile, run around the block, climb a tree, something like that that's really vigorous until you feel a little rush. Ooh, and that rushes, that adrenaline and cortisol got freed up, give you a little rush, and then they settle back down into their adrenals and adrenal cortex. You know who's amazing at this is cats. Cats hear a noise or something happens, or they have a dream and it wakes them up, or a bug happens or whatever, and they freak out and like they go trotting sideways through the room and they yowl, and then they get the zoomies. What are the zoomies? It's them releasing the adrenaline and cortisol from the system. And then when they're done with their zoomies, they stop, they have a little bath, and they're back to completely placid. So get the zoomies, however you need to do it. If you don't have time to do that, or you have a knee injury and you can't do that, longer exhales and inhales, very deep breathing, and laughing, and hugging, and sex, all does it. So any of those things that you and your patients can do before sleep are going to be helpful. Okay. So given all this time we just spent on lifestyle, if a patient is going to continue to make the choices that are causing the problem, is there anything we can do for them? Yes? No? What do you do when you have a patient with tight muscles, but they don't stretch? You know, what do you do when you have a patient with insomnia, but they won't put their phone away? Is there anything we can do? I know you're all practitioners, so what do you do in this situation? The spirit and the motivation. No and yes. Yeah. Linda, what's the homework? Like you give them something to read? Patient education. Yeah, the word patient. Isn't that funny? Educate my patients patiently. Continue to guide behavior. Put them to sleep with a treatment that, yes, right. Beautiful. Meditation and deep breathing. Good. We want to start by supporting the patient because oftentimes, very often, our patients are doing their absolute best and they don't have. When they come in, some patients come in like, I'm ready to change. Tell me what to do and I'll do it. I'm ready to completely rewrite how my day works and my night, and I'll do whatever you say. And some patients are like, it's amazing I even figured out how to make this acupuncture appointment. I'm so over water, like in over my head. So we start by supporting the patient. I love whoever said, give them a treatment that puts them to sleep, you know, to remind the body how to fall asleep, to reboot that whole thing. Have you ever failed to restart your computer for a year? I do this sometimes. I just let my computer go to sleep every night. And then after about 3 months, I haven't restarted my computer. It's running pretty slow. And my husband explained to me that that's because every time you open an app, your computer dedicates some memory to that app. And so over a couple of months, I might have, 30 apps running on my computer, even though I've closed them. There's still like attention allocated to those functions. And we're the same way. We need a reboot periodically. And acupuncture is a reboot. It's an amazing reboot of the system to help somebody turn, just like anything else. If something's not working, try unplugging it and plugging it back in. And that's really where we start with support, understanding where a patient's coming from, validating their challenges. I work with a lot of working moms. That's a really hard situation. We're trying to ask them, take time for you, do a little yoga, do a little deep breathing. And they're like, yeah, I'd love to. But in my free time, I enjoy going to the bathroom. That's what working moms do in their free time, is they try to run to the bathroom and quickly pee, usually not by themselves, usually while solving a problem on the PTA on their phone. So just validating the difficulty that people are going through in their lives, including the emotional difficulty of a cancer patient. And we're saying, well, I want you to totally change your diet and start doing yoga and this and that, but they might not have any bandwidth for that. So validating the change. So I love the first answer was no, and then also yes, because there are certain things where if a patient doesn't make a change, they're not going to be healthy in the long run. But we can rewire our own minds to say, and helping them to find their way toward the change is in fact our job. Our job is not to fix the thing. Our job is not to choose the acupuncture point that just clears that problem from their lives. Sometimes it is. But usually it's about giving the patients the vision and the path forward so that they can start to begin to see how to take care of themselves without us. I really want to say lead by example is a big one. If you take your phone to bed every night, it's really hard. You won't have the power in your recommendation to advise your patient to plug their phone in another room. And they'll say, well, it's really hard because what if somebody needs me and blah, blah, blah. And you're like, yeah, somebody could need me too, but they can't have me at 11 o'clock at night. I have recommended to a number of patients just getting a landline again for emergencies, so that you're not taking your phone to bed, because that shouldn't be your emergency phone potentially. And also recognizing that health is a trajectory and not a binary. And what do I mean by that? We're changing beings. What's that old thing? Like every cell in your body turns over every 7 years. I'm not the same person I was 7 years ago. Be selfish so you can be selfless. Yes. Does everyone know what Florentine means by that? That means sometimes we do have to take time for ourselves so that we can care for others. Yeah. That's something I talk to moms about a lot. And it's something I think about this time when I was first an acupuncturist, and I was working full-time at Pacific as a teacher. I was associate academic dean. I had all this stuff going on. But whenever PCOM would take a 2-week break, I would take a 2-week break. And I was going somewhere like Brazil or something like that. And I said to one of my patients, okay, I'll be out the next 2 weeks, but then I'll see you when I get back. And she said, oh, you're going on vacation again? And I said, yes. And she said, well, that must be nice for you. And I said, it is nice for me. And it's also nice for you to have an acupuncturist who isn't completely burned out, who's always happy to see you, who always has energy to see you, who's well rested, and who cares how you're doing because she's doing okay herself. So that person got a little bit of a lecture, but that's okay. The trajectory is we're always changing. We're always going to be needing to be tweaking what we're going through. I just went through menopause. Oh my goodness, what an adventure. That's a trajectory. It's not a binary. It's not I'm healthy or I'm well. And oftentimes people come in and they're like, I felt really good when I was 35. I want to feel like that again. And I say, well, let's see what it feels like to feel really good at 55. Let's bring what felt good about 35. Vitality, let's bring it. Engagement, a sense of play, a sense of fun, let's bring it. A sense of adventure, let's bring it. Being able to wake up in the morning without joint pain and never having to exercise. Hard. Yeah, clients are addicted to the behavior that's aggravating them. we're working with the energy of the habit. Absolutely. Well, me too, right? I'm creating my own problems and wins all the time. And what I need is support. And somebody who's like a little bit smarter than me about what's going on with me. A lot of my patients say, well, who treats you? You know, or can you treat yourself? And I say, sure, I can put a needle in myself. But can I look at myself from the outside and see what I need? Sometimes, not always. Depends. I tend to be a little meaner to myself, you know. My acupuncturist tends to do really nurturing, like nourishing points, and I tend to do moving points on myself, like, get moving. And she's like, no, please rest. The doctor who treats himself has a fool for a patient. That's right. Okay. So what I'm really talking about is holistic medicine, learning how to understand that everything connects to everything else. This is not a new idea. And it didn't start with Leonardo da Vinci, but it is what we're talking about. And what we're talking about is the gap. So how are we doing for time here? Okay. We're coming up on a break in 5 or 10 minutes. Are we good to push through just a few more minutes, then we'll take a break? Okay. I have a wonderful yoga teacher, and I was talking to her about, thanks, Donna. Okay. I was talking to her about what is your advice for when you have, like, what can I tell a patient for when you have gotten off track and you haven't been exercising and your diet has slid and you haven't been, you know, you've maybe gained a few pounds or whatever, you were running, but you're not running and now you're out of shape, feeling like you can't run again. What do you do? And what do you tell people to do? And she gave me the opposite advice of any I'd ever heard before. And I absolutely love it. And I use it all the time, which is, and I think one of you sort of suggested this on the chat. She makes 4 acupuncture appointments. She goes in 4 times a week. She makes a massage appointment. And she tries to go for a 10-minute walk whenever she can. And I was like, what? And she said, I need to remind my body that I feel better when I'm doing better. So acupuncture helps to balance me out. And then I remember how it feels in my body when my chi is flowing. And I go for a walk. I think she said prana, but you know what I mean? I go for a walk. And I'm not trying to go for a run or push myself or beat myself up for being out of shape. I'm just reminding how good it feels to get outside for 10 minutes and look at the trees and breathe a little air and get a little mental reboot. So she was really talking about, how do we bring it back? How do we get back on track? And she said, use pleasure. What we're trying to do is helping, and this is what supporting the patient, validating their choices. You're lying on the acupuncture table, getting back in touch with yourself. Instead of always being on your phone, you're back in touch with your feet. And what do your feet want to do? They want to walk. You're getting back in touch with your spleen, nourishing the energy of your spleen. And what does your spleen want to do? Extract nutrition. It doesn't want to eat brownies. You know, it wants to extract nutrition and bring up clear cognition into the brain and deliver the heart some materials to make blood and deliver the liver a package of chi to move around the body. The spleen is trying to be generative and it gets exhausted. And then what we do is try to like punch it in the face to get it going again. And what we want to do is nourish, and we can do it with ourselves too. So the gap has 2 pieces to it. This is when the patient has done everything that they can. They have made all the changes that they can, and they've made all the important changes. And they've made enough changes that it should be good enough. But we either have to, 1, clean up some of the damage they did while they weren't on track, or 2, it wasn't purely lifestyle to begin with. And I think this is something that in a certain way, some people overemphasize lifestyle as being everything, when the reality is you can have a vegan marathon runner with a cholesterol of 300. Now, maybe they have cholesterol 300 because a vegan marathoner is overtaxing their system and the body is holding cholesterol as false yin. Have you ever heard of false yin? So sometimes people have really high cholesterol because they're hitting it too hard this way. But some people say, well, it runs in my family. We're all lean people. I eat a Mediterranean diet. I do yoga every day, and my triglycerides are through the roof. So there is a gap where they're not really causing the problem. They're making very good choices. And that's sort of when acupuncture and herbs come into the picture. So we've cleaned up the lifestyle stuff. We've helped them decide, like, you're eating too much, you're eating too little, more vegetables, more bone broth, whatever that individual patient needs, whether we're trying to bring in more yin or we're trying to clear dampness. Everybody needs a lot of fiber. Everybody needs to eat a rainbow. I don't know if you guys have ever, how much nutrition class you've had, but all you really need to know about nutrition, in my opinion, is that every vitamin expresses in produce in a different color. So vitamin A, I think, is yellow, and, vitamin K is green, and antioxidants are blue and purple. So if you go to the grocery store and you go to the produce section and you pick food whose flesh, not the skin, but the flesh, is a rainbow, and you buy that and you eat it, you're going to get everything you need. And you want to try to get 10 sources of produce a week, not 10 servings of spinach, but 10 different spinach, blueberries, peaches, mangoes, red onion, sweet potato, pumpkin, zucchini, eggplant, every kind of bell pepper. You want all different colors. And if somebody's eating all different colors, it's going to give their gut biome all the prebiotics they need. It's going to give the small intestine all the vitamins that they need. It's going to give you a ton of fiber. And so if that's the center of your diet, is making sure you're doing all of that. And for people with kids, making a chart on the wall, and everybody gets a sticker every time they eat one of their colors in a day. You'll get your kids involved in eating the rainbow too, which can be really helpful. It helps mom if the kids, to figure out a way for the kids to do it too. And then we're raising people who are coming up in a slightly healthier diet. Okay. So that's some more food stuff. But the gap is, okay, they're doing it. They're fine. They're making good decisions. They're doing great. But how are we going to figure out what they need next? And that's where we choose strategies. The strategies are just the regular strategies of Chinese medicine, and this goes back to our diagnosis piece. If you have a diagnosis of spleen qi deficiency with dampness and phlegm, then our treatment strategies are going to be tonify spleen qi, drain damp, transform phlegm, maybe transform food stagnation. Maybe they've, and then we might look at how long have they had the spleen deficiency, how's their blood. We're going to look at what are some of our strategies going to be. Drain damp, scatter cold, release the exterior, and remembering the sort of core basic concepts of treating what's acute first. But we can always treat it in the context of what's chronic. And chronic is like their constitution, their lifestyle, what they're always dealing with, and then what's going on today. So, we put out the fire before we talk about choosing fire-resistant building materials. So we choose our strategies. And then this is what we're going to talk about when we come back from the break. Once you have your strategy, how do you figure out what to do about it? So we're going to take a break in just a minute. Does anybody have any questions? Cynthia, in the Q&A, you said you have a podcast. Well, by all means, everyone, if you have a podcast, share it in the chat. We'd all love to know about you. Thanks, Florentine. Okay. Donna, is this a 10-minute break? Okay. It's currently whatever time you are at, 03. So please come back at whatever time you're at, 13. Have a nice break, drink some water, move around a little bit, and I'll see you in 10 minutes. Okay.
Recording stopped. Recording in progress.
All right, are we back? Welcome back. Okay. Anything coming up for anybody? Feel free to put a question or reflection in the box. Starting with some basics to get us all on the same page. I'm assuming this is all largely review for everyone so far. And I really invite you to be thinking about how do you handle this in your practice? What do you do with it? Where do you go with it? So that this can be reflective time for you. You do have to take a quiz on this tomorrow, but if you pay attention, you'll be able to. I don't want you to be stressed about that. I want you to really be thinking about, how do I spend my time with patients? How do I work with them when they're coming in with, I have to face the fact that they might have to change their whole life around, and I'm the one who needs to tell them that, and I'm the one who needs to help them with that. And then what we're going to talk about next is, how do we determine how to break it up so that we're not trying to do everything all at once? So a big question that I think is important is acupuncture versus herbs. And you can pop this into the chat if you want to. What's acupuncture and what's herbs? What does acupuncture do better? What do herbs do better? And what's the upside of acupuncture versus herbs? The upside of herbs versus acupuncture. Substance versus energy. Yeah, so how does that play out for a patient? Yeah, patients who take medications, maybe acupuncture is safer. Maybe herbs get a little more complicated. Acupuncture opens the blockages and herbs fill them up. Yeah. Compliance. Acupuncture for the acute issue. Yes and no, right? Herbs nourish more deeply. Great. Herbs sustain the pattern the acupuncture is resetting. Herbs are great for travel when you can't come in for acupuncture. Yeah, traditionally people maybe would be getting acupuncture 4 times a week. Our patients aren't getting acupuncture 4 times a week. They can't afford to, they don't have time. Erica, you find acupuncture gets more concrete results, something tangible. You feel that acupuncture is more tangible than herbs? Well, you feel it in the moment, right? I mean, one thing about herbs, for the most part, there's a few examples, right? The patients feel the shift during the acupuncture treatment in a way that taking a handful of herbs are more of a long-term, we're trying to like wear away at something or fill something back in. Herbs reinforce acupuncture treatment. Yeah. So there's sort of a invigorate versus nourish, qi versus blood, yang versus yin, promote function versus the fuel for the function. I know as a practitioner that sometimes if I don't quite have my head wrapped around a case, if I don't quite know for sure what's going on with somebody, I can always give them an acupuncture treatment. Because acupuncture is like, where is this problem happening? You know, look at all the places the person pointed when they were talking. This is one of the benefits of giving them 3 or 4 minutes to just talk, is they start rubbing body parts and they're touching channels. They're touching acupuncture points. So when I'm charting, I'll write down in the margin of my chart, every time the patient touches a channel or a point, I'll write down the channel and the point so that I can see. Oh, the patient has to leave their physical environment and move to get acupuncture. Yeah, herbs are taken at home or work. Right, interesting. So when I'm working with a new patient, I'm going to do acupuncture for sure, because I always have an acupuncture treatment that I know will be helpful. But with herbs, it's more substantive. And so you don't want to drain dampness if that's not the right thing with Fu Ling, but you can always do a spleen 9. You know, spleen 9 is never going to mess somebody up because the acupuncture points are intelligent. Their job is spleen 9's job is to regulate something that's happening with water. Fu Ling's job is to drain. It's just going to come in and drain. Spleen 9 is going to modulate. You know, so if we needle spleen 9 and spleen 3, then, you know, and then the other thing that I think that I do all the time is I learn from myself. So I don't know if this ever happens to you, but sometimes I'll write an acupuncture treatment and I'll think, okay, this is great. Stomach 36, large intestine 10, spleen 9, stomach 40, run 12, P6. This is the kind of treatment I would give. A lot, right? I'm a TCM person. I work in Wisconsin. What do people in Wisconsin do? We eat a lot of cheese. What's the weather like? It's humid. This is dampness. It's a lot of spleen deficiency and a lot of dampness. So I end up damp, phlegm, the inner 4 gates, stomach 36 and LI10. And if I'm sitting around going like, oh, I just not quite sure what herb formula I want to do. I'm not sure where I want to start. A bunch of things come to mind. I can look at my acupuncture strategy and say, well, what am I trying to do here? What is my acupuncture telling me that I'm doing? In this case, I'm nourishing digestion. I'm draining dampness and phlegm. I'm harmonizing the stomach, calming the middle jiao, harmonizing the middle jiao. Well, if I wanted to do that herbally, what would I do? What's this formula? Does my acupuncture treatment suggest a formula to anyone? Shannon gets it in one. Exactly right, Leo Junzatong. So I'm using my strategy. I'm using my intervention to learn about my own strategy. And it can go the other way too. So what's this formula? Does anybody know this formula? This is an easy one. Anybody know this formula? Yeah, Bansha Hopo Tong. We know because Bansha and Hopo are the first 2 ingredients, right? For plum pitchi. So if I'm going to do plum pitchi, if somebody comes in with plum pitchi, I'm going to do plum pitchi. It's plum pitchi. They're going to get, we already know they're going to get Bansha Hopo Tong. We can look at Bansha Hopo Tong and create an acupuncture strategy from it. Bansha, stomach 40. In my mind, same. In my mind, Bansha and stomach 40 are like the same idea. Hopo redirects rebellious chi downward. We do some throat chakra stuff, run 22, clear up the throat. 17 to help everything down bear, and 12 to harmonize the stomach so we're not getting all this phlegm. Fu Ling and spleen 9, again, that's, to me, they're just the same. But the difference is spleen 9 is regulating with dampness and Fu Ling is just going to drain it. Spleen 9 is never going to dehydrate anyone, but Fu Ling can. Xinjiang, maybe stomach 36, P6, Zisuya, lung 7. What is Zisuya doing in that formula? It's a light dispersing, enters the lung channel. So you can look at your herb formula and have an acupuncture treatment that's just ready to go. Okay. So I call the strategy learning from myself. And now we're going to start talking about herbs. We've already talked about a bunch of issues about complexity. A lot of our patients are on medications and they might be open to doing herbs, but you might not feel confident to give somebody an herb formula, or they're open and you're open, but their doctor is not open. So I work with a lot of cancer patients, and at the big cancer hospital in Milwaukee, they basically just say no to every herb formula. It's unfortunate. I'm sure it will change over time. But right now what's going on is they kind of say no to every formula. So one issue is we can't always give. I've also sent an herb formula to a doctor to take a look at. And the patient texted me from the doctor's office, we need the ingredients. And I said, the ingredients are listed on the bottle. And they said, well, these are all in Latin and Chinese. And I was like, yeah, they're Chinese herbs. They're going to be listed in Chinese, and the Latin's a pharmaceutical name. And the patient said, well, my doctor doesn't know anything about this stuff. And I was like, I know, but I do. And this is cool. But it's difficult the doctors are just trying to keep their patients safe because patients are always taking crazy stuff. Our patients do this too. Patients are always taking crazy stuff they learned about on their internet. Their Aunt Louisa's neighbor told them to get turkey tail. So they buy a bunch of mushrooms on the internet and then they take them and then they say, I started to have, whatever, some weird symptoms since I started taking turkey tail from the internet. What should I do? And I'm like, I don't know. Ask your Aunt Louisa's neighbor. Like, I didn't tell you to take turkey tail. Right, Erica. So they're asking for all the active ingredients. How would we be able to list the active ingredients of a Chinese herb? It's a plant. It's a plant piece. Right? It's very, very, very difficult. And John Chen, who started Evergreen Herbs, wrote an amazing textbook on active ingredients and herbs, but it's partial because any botanical could have thousands of active ingredients in it. We're not doing an extract here. Boiling the herb is a kind of extraction. Jinx, Florentine. I was one of the reviewers on that book when it came out, and it's excellent. I have it in my office. It's a really, really great thing. But there's no way we can't list all of the active ingredients in a plant part. Yes, Stephanie, thank you for that question. Active ingredients, for example, in ma huang, one of the active ingredients in the plant, ma huang, is ephedrine. So you can extract ephedrine from ma huang, and then that would be one of the ingredients. But it's not the only ingredient in ma huang. Ma huang is a plant piece. So it has thousands of compounds that make up that little piece of grass. And in Western medicine, it's all about the extraction. You're taking this one thing out of the plant. You take willow bark and you extract salicylic acid, right, out of the bark. And now you have aspirin. But you could also take willow bark for your headache, and then it wouldn't destroy your stomach because willow bark isn't bad for the stomach because it has all these other active ingredients and compounds that are nourishing. Plants work synergistically, not individually, right? So in a medication, when you extract a compound out of a plant, when it's in the plant, it's balanced. The other compounds balance it. It tends to be pretty balanced. But when you take one thing out, it had all these compounds around it that were sort of balancing it, that now you don't have them anymore. So this substance becomes much more potent, right? We tell patients to take 12 pills a day. We don't take anybody to take 12 aspirin a day because they would die. Your stomach would bleed out. So does that make sense, Stephanie? Does that answer active ingredients? Okay. And so one of the reasons that we really don't have a lot of problems with Chinese herbs having bad herb-drug interactions is that we're using the whole plant part. So we're using the whole stem, we're using the whole leaf, we're using the whole root. And so they're not as unstable. They get unstable when you extract them from the plant part. A and B, the body sort of recognizes herbs because of their flavor as a food, and they get digested via the GI tract. So I don't know if you guys know this, but the first part of digestion is in the mouth, not just chewing, which is important, not just getting saliva into the food, which is important, but the tongue is detecting what's coming in, and it's sending messages to, among other organs, the pancreas to say, oh, this thing is very sweet that's coming in, start secreting insulin, or, oh, this thing is very, start getting ready for the stuff that has come into the body. The spleen is the tongue is sending all this information into the body. And the body starts responding based on the flavor. This is an ancient concept the West has caught up with, which is that the tongue gives information and the flavor of the thing creates a response. So we want patients to have that flavor on the tongue. If they take capsules, there's still an opening that happens in here where the body is uptaking it typically more from the GI tract. It helps if you're worried about this with somebody, have them take granules instead of capsules so that they get the flavor, because then their body starts digesting it via the GI tract and absorbing it through things like the small intestine and the spleen. Exactly, Florentine. I'm going to talk about that in a second. So that the body is absorbing it, as opposed to a pill where it goes straight into the bloodstream, straight to the liver. And the herb drug interactions that we worry about tend to be happening in the liver. So the sugar substitutes like Splenda and that kind of thing. And even I'm not really a big fan of stevia for the same reason. I'm not really a big fan of any of the sugar substitutes at all. And I'm not a fan of sugar. But the reason is it's so sweet on the tongue. It's 10 times sweeter than sugar. And so the body can have a big insulin response. And then what comes in is nothing. And then you have all this insulin barging in, knocking on all the cells. Basically, it's like playing ding dong ditch. And the cells say, "Ooh, is that a bunch of sugar?" And the insulin is like, "No, just insulin." And then the cells become insulin resistant. And then we have problems. Then we have diabetes and PCOS. The problem with sugar is that it takes something like 5 feet of sugar cane to make a teaspoon of sugar. And so that is a very, very refined chemical. Sometimes I laugh because patients come into the office and they're like, "Oh, I don't want to take herbs. I don't like putting that kind of thing in my body." And they're drinking like a Starbucks caramel macchiato. It's like that is such a more refined, discombobulating, dysregulating pharmaceutical substance, the sugar in that and the colors in that, than like Xiaoyao Gansatang, right? So the first thing to remember is that the herbs are plants. They're part of nature, and we're animals, and plants and animals know how to handle each other. I also have a number of patients who, like, I don't know if you've ever seen this, patients with Lyme's disease can kind of get allergic to everything. But if you've ever had a patient come in and they're kind of like got allergy tested and they're kind of like allergic to everything, grass, dust, trees, dirt, pollen, mites, cats, dogs, squirrels, cotton, wool, every food, they're just sort of like allergic to everything. They're just allergic to their home planet. That's going to be a difficult patient to give a Chinese herbal formula to, because our formulas have 12, 14, 16 ingredients. Some of the Chen, like the Evergreen Collection formulas, are quite big and they're great. They're really interesting and they're really well written. But with patients who are very sensitive, they're going to have a negative response to one of those, and we're never going to be able to figure out which one it is. So we have patients who can't take a big, huge, gigantic formula. I have patients with budget considerations. They just want to see if the acupuncture will help first. And I will tell you that one big thing that I see in the Midwest is people say, "Let's do one thing at a time. I don't want to do all this stuff at once. Like, I'm not going to do all this stuff. I'm not going to change my diet and exercise and do acupuncture and do herbs. I just want to see if acupuncture works." And I always say, sure, acupuncture is really helpful, but we're not trying to run a research study here. We're trying to get you a therapeutic result. And right now you're kind of in trouble. You're getting a migraine every week for 3 days. Your life is very bad. So what I would like to do is throw everything at it. Everything I've got. I would like to get this problem under control for you. And then once you haven't had a migraine in a couple months, or you're only getting one a month, then we'll see, do you need all these herbs? Do you need to make all these changes? You can test. Is gluten okay? Or does it give you a migraine? Are nightshades okay? You can test it, but let's get you to the mountaintop first. So let's start by making things better. Everybody's a little different. We have to handle each case differently. And then we have patients who are damp and fatigued and not sleeping well. We have patients who have a cyclical problem or relapsing problem. So there's a lot of complexity in figuring out what we're going to do with somebody. It's not a lot of straightforward out of the book. Patient comes in complaining of this very coherent thing. We know exactly what it is. They're not doing anything that's going to counteract our treatment, and we're good to go. We have to work a little bit more carefully. So one of the places that I start, because this is about not having to write an herbal formula for people, but being creative. One of the places that I start is the first couple herbs in every formula are food. mint, cinnamon, ginger, dates, walnuts, sesame seeds, garlic, miso, scallions. The list goes on and on. If you've taken Chinese nutrition, any food has an energetic signature like an herb. We can look at any food as if it's an herb. And so sometimes I tell my patients that Chinese herbal formulas are like recipes. So let's start with a recipe. The first formula in the Materia Medica and Formulas and Strategies is Song Chur Tong, which is miso soup with scallions. And that's for when you're first sort of starting to come down with something. And that's something that we can have people, my patients sometimes text me from the grocery store. I don't know if this happens to you. They say, oh, my daughter came down with a cold, or I'm starting to feel a little sniffly. What should I do? And they don't have any herbs at home to take. So I can either say, well, you come get some herbs, but it's always on a Sunday. So I say, what have you got around? You have some miso soup? Because miso is really going to break up some of that stagnation in the chest. And the scallions kind of break through, put a little fresh ginger in there, and they start feeling better. I also sometimes will prescribe. I'll say, look, this is a Chinese formula. Kanji or oatmeal, depending on their cultural preference, their food preference. One of the things that I see a lot with my cancer patients is doctors are starting to give cancer patients senna, fanxia, to treat constipation. But that is such a rough, harsh thing to do to somebody who's going through chemo. Because chemo, the reason they're constipated is that the chemo is a really hot, really drying substance. And the mouth to the anus, the whole system, the whole tube gets inflamed and heated and dry. So now you've got a patient with a completely hot, inflamed, dried out system, and they're constipated. And you're giving senna, which is promoting peristalsis and trying to push that stool out. But the stool is dry and the tissues are dry. And that's how you get hemorrhoids and bleeding in the stool. So what we want to make sure is that we would never do that in Chinese medicine. We would never move without moistening when it comes to constipation. So a way to work with, say, this cancer patient who can't take herbs, but can take senna, is, and this is just, I'm sure in California, like many of you have doctors who are very happy working with herbs, right? They're being prescribed opioids, which also slows, very, very difficult for constipation as well. Yeah. And then also some of, many of the meds in the sort of cancer cocktail, we're going to talk about cancer this afternoon. Many of the meds in the cancer cocktail are constipating and drying. So, and then opioids slow down peristalsis. So they're just getting it from every angle. And they're tired and they're resting. A lot of people are maybe not getting as much exercise as they have been or whatever. So we do some fiber for moving, like kanji or steel cut oats. This is not microwave oatmeal. This is steel cut oats with apples, walnuts, sesame oil, sesame seeds, honey. This is my preference for a sweetener, that people use maple syrup or honey, something that's naturally sweet. But that isn't too heavily extracted. That's more of a whole food. It's just more regulating for the body. And honey's really sweet. You don't need very much of it. It's good for you. So this is my first strategy. My first line of attack is, what is a food for a patient who can't do herbs at all, take herbs at all? What are some herbs that I can get in there? Like ginger. Also, there's I'll get to this one, formula and herbal tea. So oftentimes in my practice, I'll give somebody a patent to take, like Swanza Rentong, and then I'll give them a recommendation for something like chamomile tea and a whole bedtime ritual. And this is where we bring the holistic lifestyle. What is everything that goes on that's keeping you from sleeping? Plugging in the phone in the kitchen, doing 10 minutes of neck rolls or legs up the wall, resting for 10 minutes with legs up the wall while your chamomile tea brews. Take a dose of Swanza Rentong, sip a little chamomile tea, go to bed, put some lavender oil on your feet, read a book. That person now has not just an herbal formula modified for them with chamomile, but also a whole routine and a ritual that all together is going to start to move them toward maybe 333 meditation, or they can play an app with soothing music or whatever they need. Let's see, Shaofujuyu Tang. I like to add a chai tea to this. Not the chai tea in a box with the syrup, but just the chai tea spices are all the spices in the scatter cold category. It's like cloves and ginger and cardamom and cinnamon, really getting into the middle jiao and the lower jiao and warming it up and breaking up stagnation. Great combo for menstrual cramps. Shangsha Liao Zhenzi Tang and ginger tea. Often these patients are not thirsty. They don't drink water. But if you can get them started on a little bit of ginger tea, the bite of the ginger kind of cuts through. And you can also have them make just like room temperature ginger tea or infused ginger water. So oftentimes I'll have a patient take a mason jar full of water and just 5 slices of fresh ginger. Just scrub it. Don't take the peel off. Ginger peel is a great diuretic, great for draining damp. And you just take thin slices of the ginger and throw it in the mason jar and let it steep overnight. And then that's the water that they take with them to the gym or that they sip while they're working or whatever. So they're getting this slow, steady infusion of ginger in their water throughout the day. And oftentimes those damp patients will end up drinking a little bit more if there's a little flavor in there, because dampness hates bland, and that bland water kind of mixes with the dampness within them and just makes a stagnant pond. But ginger water, ginger tea really cuts through it. Whenever possible, I try to have my patients do fresh ginger, but dried ginger is great too. Ginger tea bag is absolutely fine. I use green tea. I recommend green tea a lot with Yin Sha San because I like the uplifting brightness of green tea. Really helps deliver the Yin Sha San to the upper body. So when somebody texts me, okay, we got first day sore throat and fever, well, now we assume that it's COVID, but whatever it is, it's the early beginning onset of something. Get somebody started on Yin Sha San and green tea, a lot of green tea to really clear and release the exterior as much as possible. Erica mentioned topical. I use herbal tea bags as poultices. So if you have a patient with pink eye or a sty, a green tea bag or chrysanthemum tea bag, really great. You just make a pot of tea with 5 tea bags, and then they can drink a cup of tea and put one of the tea bags on their eye. So you can use the tea bag as a poultice. Mint is great for a rash, helping an itchy rash express, as can be chamomile, not always. So you can have somebody patch test by just setting an herbal tea bag right on one little patch of their rash and see how it goes. Usually mint tea is extremely soothing. So I use mint tea bags all the time. There's also many herb companies around, many tea companies around. In Milwaukee, we have Rishi Tea, which is beautiful, really high quality herbal tea. And they have tangerine peel and ginger, which is chenpi and ginger, which you're already halfway into a phlegm formula with just that herbal tea alone. And you're not getting in anybody's way with their doctor or their medication or anything like that. I do want to make sure that I mention the major herbs, and this is important, the major drugs that create problems. I know I said we don't have a lot, so it's important that you remember just a few. Warfarin, Coumadin, lithium, and dilantin. I'm going to put that in the chat for you guys, just so you have it. Most people are not doing warfarin and Coumadin anymore because there's like Xarelto is out now. These are all, what's it called? Blood thinners. Xarelto is okay to use herbs with. Warfarin and Coumadin, no. Lithium, no. Dilantin, no. And the reason for these is that they have a very narrow therapeutic window. And what that means is the difference between how much dosage is a dosage that works for somebody and then how much is toxic minus how much is bioavailable. So I'm just going to take a minute and do a little herb drug safety here, okay? Drugs like, I haven't had a problem with Eliquis. I don't think Eliquis is in this category. What you really want to do is just make sure, if you've got a patient taking a blood thinner to prevent a stroke, you do not need to put them on blood moving herbs. They already have that part of their strategy. So Linda, let me answer your question in a second, because I just want to finish up on the therapeutic window thing. If you take warfarin, it has very low bioavailability because it's sort of a poison. It's based on a poison, and the body immediately starts trying to clear it from the system. So you have to take a relatively high dose of warfarin to get the therapeutic dose, because your body is trying to clear it from its system as fast as it possibly can. If you give somebody an herb that has a similar mechanism of action to warfarin, they're going to be competing for the body clearing. The body's accidentally going to clear some herbs, and you can very quickly go from the therapeutic dosage to twice the therapeutic dosage, but now you can be in the toxic dosage. So that's where you really want to just be careful, to the point of too careful, with warfarin, lithium, and dilantin is an anti-epilepsy. So anytime you've got a patient on any anti-epilepsy meds, you want to make sure that you're not going to be messing with them. And so personally, I don't work with herbally beyond the sort of food realm much with patients who take any kind of anti-seizure or any kind of, Capra, right? Okay, Linda, you're bringing up two great things. So the first thing is stroke. When you're working with a patient who's had a stroke, you want to know, as their doctor should know, whether they had a bleed or whether they had an occlusion. And when you're working with stroke, what we really want is to get the circulation back and hearty. And if they're taking something to prevent blood clots and they're taking a blood thinner, you don't need to do that, because you can think, okay, those medications are already doing that strategy. So when I asked a few minutes ago, who does which strategy best? What part of this patient's care is under what intervention? The blood thinners are for the blood clots. You don't need to work with that herbally. You might notice, which I notice all the time with my stroke patients, extremely wet tongue, extremely pale tongue. Maybe their meds are really harsh on their digestion, or maybe whatever led them to have a stroke in the first place. Maybe I feel like I'm talking about spleen all the time right now. It's not all spleen, but I'm thinking about my stroke patients right now, and I tend to see this really big, fat, pale, wet tongue that's really scalloped. I might just do a little bit of gentle draining. So I don't double up on strategies. If somebody is taking a med that if I'm trying to get them off the med, then I will double up on the strategy. Okay. So if I have a patient who comes in on an antidepressant and they don't like their antidepressant, they want to go off their antidepressant, I say, why? And then they say, well, I'm not depressed anymore. So the first question is, are you not depressed anymore because you're taking an antidepressant that's working? And might it be working? And they're like, oh yeah, maybe, I don't know, but it makes me feel really tired all the time, or it also prevents me from feeling happy, or it prevents me from having an orgasm, or have sexual dysfunction with it. And then we say, okay, well, that's no good. Do we maybe want to try, before we take you off of it, bringing your dosage down just a little bit? And we can work with their prescribing practitioner to bring their dosage down 10%, 20% for a month and see how they do. And then put them on some herbs and take them down another 20%, and see how they do. And then you can take them down another 20%. What I've found is that for, probably 60% of my patients who've come in to get off their antidepressants, they did actually get to a dosage of the antidepressant that was a little too low. Like, whoa, I just started getting depressed. Okay, pop it back up. We pop it just a little bit back up. And then they find that the basement is no longer so low, but they feel much more like themselves. And when they're having a rough day, they can take Chai Hulang Muli Tang. We can give them something, that helps their liver chi roll, that helps to clear phlegm and damp, whatever that nourishes blood, that nourishes the heart. And then we have them maybe starting to engage in the world a little bit more. And there's a whole holistic way that we're bringing the dosage of their med down by bringing a similar herb up. So that's one way to do herb drug strategies. But if you're working with blood clots or seizures, you don't want to displace any of their medication. So you don't want to do something that's similar at all. You can say, okay, we're not trying to get you off that med. You're going to be on that med. That med's good enough. It's fine. Okay. I don't prescribe CBD at all because I am not trained in CBD. And this is pretty big. This is for me an extremely serious issue when it comes to scope of practice. So a lot of you may have additional training where you became certified in doing CBD. I know there's a lot of trainings out there. I just want you to really think about it, never giving a patient something. They come to your office. My office says Dr. Carrie Murphy on the door, you know, Doctor of Acupuncture and Chinese Medicine. My patients have a reasonable right to assume that I'm not going to give them any advice or dispense any medication that I am not a doctor of. So it's not like, oh, hey, I heard this one thing was really good. You should give it a try. I might say that at a cocktail party, have you tried CBD? But I'm not going to say it to my patients because I'm not a doctor of CBD. And as such, I can't manage the case. So then they say, well, which kind should I take? You know, this or that? I don't know. What dosage? I don't know. Well, I took it and it gave me a really bad headache. What should I do? I don't know. And this is something that I feel like a lot of us at times in our desire to help, we kind of become input machines. And we're like, oh, what about this? What about that? What about magnesium? What about, you know, we start anything that might help, because what we really want to be doing is helping. We want to help people so much. And so we're kind of willing to, like, anything that we heard that might be helpful, we want to make available. And it's really important to take a breath, in my opinion, and notice, am I a doctor of this? And if there were any screwy thing down the line, if I give a patient Shaoyou-san and they have a headache, I know what to do. If they have diarrhea, I know what to do. If they, you know, if it makes them feel unsettled, I know exactly what to do. I know what to do with their dosage, how to bring them up and down exactly. I know how to maybe give them another formula to work with it or give them a different formula instead. Yeah. So Florentine, yeah, patient over profit for sure. But for me, and I think most of us, please God, tell me you didn't go into Chinese medicine to get rich. You know, we can make a good living doing this. We absolutely can, and we should. But this isn't a get-rich-quick scheme, Chinese medicine. We are in it because we really love people, I think, and we care, and we want to help, and we love the medicine so much. And we're like, look at this map I have of the world, your inner world. And I can give you all these tools to work with because I'm deeply, deeply knowledgeable about them. And I'm an enormous nerd and I think about it all the time. And I spend all day Sunday on it. I could be eating brunch right now, but no, I was thinking about you, you know, to have that level of expertise at everything that you suggest. And if not, it can be really great to do what I do, which is have a network of people that you refer to. I have a beautiful altar table in my office with flowers and candles, and it has everybody's business card on it, who I love in Milwaukee. 3 great therapists, 3 great PTs, 3 great massage therapists, a yoga instructor, you know, a sound bath person, a holistic health coach, someone who's going to do all these little hacks all day long, talk to people about how they feel, so that I can just say, no more cheese, go talk to her, you know, and let other experts pick up the slack. Holistic doesn't mean I have to be the expert in everything, because I can't be. I'm 20 years in and I feel like, you know, I started school in fall of 99 and I feel like I'm just getting my head wrapped around it. And I'm, you know, I'm pretty good at it, but it's bigger than us. And we want to be humble to it and in love with it. Okay. So one strategy that I use is small little tiny formulas. And I use these in 2 ways. One way is for the patients who are really sensitive. And one way is I break them up, you know, so maybe Sejun Satang daytime and Si Wutang at night. You know, if you have a patient who is qi and blood deficient and you want to give them Gui Pitang, but they're not sleeping well, can you give them a dose of Gui Pitang at night? Not really, you know. That Huang Qi and that Ren Shen might be just a little bit too much, you know, for that sensitive patient. So having the tiny little module formulas can be really useful. And then they can also be really useful. Like I love Dangui Bushui Tang because it's just Huang Qi and Dangui. And you're just trying to stimulate blood production. And that could be something that somebody takes for 5 days at the end of their menstrual cycle. You know, if they tend to be somebody who gets a headache after their period because they get a little blood deficient after the period, Huang Qi and Dang Gui is a really nice combo for that. And it's something very simple, and it's something they take a few days a month, you know. And it's also something that you can add to a formula. Like, let's say you're looking at Gui Pitang and you think, I wish there was more Dang Gui in this, you know, this isn't enough blood nourishment. You know, or this is Gui Pitang is great because it has all these blood nourishers in it, but has a little Huang Qi in it. But I want to make sure this isn't too heavy for this person. I want a lot of Huang Qi in it. Well, then you add Dang Gui Bu Shui Tang. Similarly with Xiao Yao Gansao Tang, which is Bai Xiao and Gansao. This is such a great formula. It's one of the very few formulas in Chinese medicine that is like acupuncture in that it kicks in. You feel it right away. Nasli, I'm gonna hold that question for just 1 second. It kicks in right away. This is the ultimate Charlie horse formula. Here's a clinical pearl if you didn't know this. Xiao Yao Gansao Tang is for abdominal cramping, belly cramping. It also works for the belly of the calf muscle. So if you've got a patient waking in the night with restless leg or Charlie horses, Xiao Yao Gansao Tang is a great middle of the night formula. Nasli, would you, can you ask me your question? Can you give me a little more information? Do you mean how long at a time? Like, do I give somebody herbs for a month at a time or a week at a time? Is that what you're asking? Okay. Yeah, depends. Remember that answer from Chinese medicine school? It depends on the patient. And it's what we're going to be talking about all day, so I'm definitely going to get to it. I personally, at my practice, when I have a new patient, I ask them to come in 5 times over 5 weeks. So I like to see my new patients weekly for 5 weeks. And then at the end of 5 weeks, we both kind of know what's going on. They're either like a little better, way better, not better at all. If they're not better at all, and it's neuropathy, I say, hold on, because it takes 10 sessions to get started with neuropathy. If it's anything else, I might be thinking like, this might not be an acupuncture case. I might not be the person. We might need to start somewhere else with you, like chiropractic. Or you might need an MRI, like what's going on that this isn't getting better. It should be. But usually within 5 sessions, I have a real good sense of the patient, and the patient has a good sense of it too. So typically, I only give the patient a week's worth of herbs. Then once I have a patient who, you know, if they have a big, long chronic thing, they're going through perimenopause, you know, I might have them on a whole regimen that's broken up over the entire month. Okay. But typically, if I had to give a short answer, I give herbs for a week at a time. And that's the perfect segue into being modular. This is how I work primarily, given the constraints of not writing formulas for my individual patients. I break things up between day and night, meaning a daytime formula and a nighttime formula. I also have patients who go 7 months with no problem. They have a chronic condition and then it flares. I have patients with a chronic flaring seasonal condition like allergies, seasonal allergies, and they will have a formula throughout the year and then a formula for when their allergies are flaring. For the menstrual cycle, which in Chinese medicine, we think of as a 4-week cycle. In Western medicine, it's kind of like 2-week chunks. And we're going to cover all this at great length, great detail. So I have different formulas that I use in there. We're going to talk a little bit about COVID, how I've been working with it, exactly what formulas I've been using in the early stage when somebody first tests positive, in the sort of medium stage, and if somebody is getting in the long haul, and also prevention. And then cancer, there's a couple of strategies that I see a lot of cancer patients. It's one of my specialties, and there are ways to work herbally. We're going to talk about those. And then I want to spend a big chunk of time on perimenopause and menopause because it's a big deal and everybody's talking about it right now. I don't know if you read the article in the New York Times 6 months ago, 8 months ago, about some rethinking of hormone replacement therapy. and how maybe we were too quick to pull hormone replacement therapy. I know that my patient population came roaring in with that, and they were like, I want hormone replacement therapy. Is that what I should be doing? So that's a big, big conversation that we're going to have. And I did create a website about it, which I welcome you guys to all take a look at whenever you want, called WTF Opause. I'm going to let you spell that out, which is a resource for perimenopause and menopause. It's all the information I didn't find high quality online. What is a hot flash? Which are the hormones that are involved in perimenopause and menopause? And it gets into a deep dive. And I'm gonna cover a bunch of that. So don't worry, we're getting to it. Okay. Daytime formulas. During the day, we tonify qi and yang. Obviously, night, tonify blood and yin. So this is a great way to use your patent pharmacy to do some really complex treatment, but not having the patient, but being able to just use patents. So what do you think? When do you typically, when do you invigorate blood? What's the best time to drain damp if you're giving somebody an invigorating formula or damp draining formula? You can put it in the chat. Any thoughts? If you're going to break something up, yeah, invigorate in the day and drain at night, not tonifying at night. Yeah, we tonify some things at night, tonify blood and yin at night. I would not drain damp at night. Why is that? Because people don't like getting up to pee in the middle of the night. So really thinking about invigorating during the day, drain damp during the day. If you have a patient who, right? If you've got a patient who is really damp, then we look at why they're really damp. Do they have weak kidneys? Then we might do something like a Liu Wei Di Huang Wan at night. Tonify the kidneys, not the kidney yang, but the kidney yin. And you've got a little bit of what's in Liu Wei Di Huang Wan, a couple drainers. There are a couple little drainers, but for the most part, it's nourishing. We're nourishing without stagnating. So you could do Jingui Shenqi Wan during the day and Liu Wei Di Huang Wan at night. I love this combination. Why? Because Jingui Shenqi Wan is a modification of Liu Wei Di Huang Wan. No, Liu Wei Di Huang Wan is a modification of Jingui Shenqi Wan, right? Liu Wei Di Huang Wan is 3 yin tonics and 3 movers. And Jingui Shenqi Wan adds fuzi, right? Guizhi. So you're warming up and invigorating during the day, the yin that you're nourishing at night. You're nourishing the patient all day long. And then in the daytime, you're also invigorating the yang, tonifying the yang. Similarly, Sijun Satang and Siwu Tang. Sijun Satang is a qi tonic. Siwu Tang is a blood tonic. I'm super sensitive to caffeine, and I'm very sensitive to qi tonics of any kind. So I love caffeine and qi tonics, but only in the morning. And then in the afternoon, I can't take an afternoon dose or an evening dose of Jingui Shenqi Wan or Buzhang Yi Qi Tang. Another combo that I use a lot is Wuling San during the day to drain, because it also has that, Guizhi piece in it. It has that warming, invigorating piece in it, but it's draining. And then at night, nourishing. Can you nourish the yang at night? It depends on the patient. But I use Yogui Wan if I have to nourish yang at night, because it's really essence. Yogui Wan really nourishes the essence. So if you've got a patient with a lot of fatigue, they're probably going to be fine with it. You just have to figure that out. Or you can do Yogui Wan during the day and Zhuogui Wan at night. So it's not like there's a hard and fast rule out there. There's a consideration of how the treatment strategy and the patient are going to be interacting. Yogui-wan and Zogui-wan are very, very similar formulas as well. And what I like about this is you don't end up giving the patient 37 different herbs. There's a similarity and there's still a focus to the way that you're putting these formulas together. Like all of us, I use Xiaoyasan all the time. And for some patients, I use Swanzao Rentang for them at night. Because Xiaoyasan is really, classically it's about liver spleen disharmony, but it also has some blood nourishment in it. And what I've found is if somebody has any kind of problem at all with Xiaoyasan, it's because they're blood deficient. So if Xiaoyasan, if with Chaihu in particular, oh, that's a great question. Okay, I'm gonna answer Nasley's question. I go with the daily dosage, if I'm using capsules, of 12 pills a day. I start with 12 capsules a day, 6 in the morning and 6 at night. For some people, it might be 6 in the morning and 6 in the late afternoon. So if I have somebody on Gui Pitong, I might give them 6 at 8 a.m. and then 6 at their energy slump. Everybody who takes Gui Pitong has an energy slump in the afternoon. Not because of Gui Pitong, but that's why they need Gui Pitong. So I say to them, instead of drinking coffee and eating cookies at 3 p.m., why don't you take your second dose of herbs at 3 p.m. so that it's not keeping them up at night. And then it's 6 Gui Pitong in the morning, 6 Gui Pitong in the afternoon, 6 in the morning, 6 at night. This is just my general rule of thumb for an average weight person with an average kind of problem. If I'm giving somebody Jingui Shenchuan, 6 in the morning and 6 at night, right? If I'm giving them Jingui Shenchuan and Liuwei Dihuangwan, I'm giving 6 Jingui Shenchuan in the morning and 6 Liuwei Dihuangwan at night. So for the most part, people are getting 12 caps a day. I'm not doing 12 of each. I'm not doing full dosages. I want people to get an arc of dosage, but a steady dosage, but an arc of strategy across the dosage, across the day. So anybody who's having problems with Xiaoyasan is blood deficient. If you get a headache, if it makes you feel rattled, this is also true of people who get rattled with coffee. If you drink a second cup of coffee and it makes you really rattled, nourishing blood and yin is very, very useful. Most of us who have insomnia or thin sleep, we're a little blood deficient. We wake up in the morning and we're exhausted. So what do we need? Coffee. It's the only way to get through the day. But then coffee robs yin to brew qi. It doesn't add qi. So what we want to be doing is adding a little bit of qi in the morning for some of those patients and adding a little bit of blood at night. If my patient is primarily deficient, I'm not giving them Xiaoyasan. That should be obvious. We all know that. I might be doing Gui Pitong in the morning and Swanzao Rentang at night. I often change when I'm giving somebody something. Si Wu Tong at night with Xiaoyasan, absolutely, yeah. What I like about Swanzao Rentang is I like Swanzao Ren. It's a great herb. It's great. It's so calming to the heart, so calming to the spirit. And I think it's a cool formula. That Mudampi in there, But I have had patients for whom Swanzao Rentang was just too heavy and they woke up with congested ears. Like I had a patient who, she was a violinist and she had really bad insomnia. And I gave her Swanzao Rentang and she's a sad sleeper. And she woke up with a completely congested right ear, could not hear. And then she was trying to play violin and she couldn't play violin because she couldn't hear out of her ear. So Swanzao Rentang can be a bit congesting, which is one of the reasons it's nice with Xiaoyasan, because you've got the sort of movement during the day and the nourishment at night. But certainly any yin or blood tonic would be appropriate at night. So if you're breaking it up like Sejun Satang in the day, Si Wu Tong at night. Yeah. And then another strategy that I use, I treat a lot of migraines. And we can talk about migraine a little bit right now. Again, we have time, I think. Yeah. The thing about migraines is, my experience, there are 2 amazing formulas. Here's a little clinical pearl for migraines. the one that I use far and away the most often in Wisconsin on my middle-aged female patients, which is the bulk of my practice, is Bansha Baiju Tian Matang. Everybody know that one? Bansha Baiju Tian Matang. I buy a lot of this formula. I use it a lot. Because what I've found is a lot of my patients have a weak little spleen and they're they have phlegm damp. And most of the time, a migraine, for whatever cause, is the liver yang rising. Now, what has caused the liver yang to rise? I've got a lot of patients with a weak, damp spleen and a lot of dampness and phlegm. The problem with nourishing yin to prevent yang from rising is it just makes them goopier. Banja Baju Tian Matang is an incredible formula for a certain kind of migraine sufferer. I also just had a patient come in. I think she started coming in like 2-3 weeks ago, and she was having, and it calms the shen, right? What more do you want? It's beautiful. Okay, can somebody type the formula in? Constance is having trouble hearing it. Ban Xia, Bai Ju, Tian Ma, Tang. Okay. Somebody type that in for your friend. Thank you. Tian, T-I-A-N. You know, that was just a typo. Okay. It's an incredible formula. It really anchors yang, and it really both prevents and treats migraine headache. And I use it all the time. Yeah, thank you. And what's nice about Banja Baiju Tian Matang, it does have some Baiju in it, but it's fine to use at night. So I do have people taking that morning and night. And then, so I had this patient come in a couple of weeks ago, and she was having extreme vertigo and dizziness. I've been treating this a lot lately. I don't know what's going on, like a lot. Extreme dizziness and vertigo. And she was having a burning sensation in her sinuses and sneezing. And she's been to the doctor 18 times and everything's fine. Nothing's wrong with her and everything's clear. But she's having sneezing attacks that last for hours to the point where she can't work. It's giving her head pain from like sneezing all the time. And she's suffering a lot. So I was like, well, I don't know what the heck that is, but I do know what a sneeze is. It's wind carrying a bunch of phlegm in the head. And so I'm going to extinguish wind with Tian Ma, anchor yang. Tian Ma makes your migraines worse. Constance, you're only sending your message out to host and panelists. You should change to everyone so everyone can see that comment. Definitely going to be addressing it because it's super interesting. So the other formula that I give the most to my migraine patients is Tian Ma Gotang Yin. And this is for the patient who is not damp and phlegmy. This is for the patient who is yin and blood deficient primarily. And I give them Tianma Gotang Yin in the day, and then I very often use Tianwang Bushandan for them at night. Because what I find with my yin deficient yang rising patients is migraine patients, is something that's really calming to the spirit. Not just Liao Di Huangwan, which is very nourishing to yin, but in kind of a generic way, no offense, Zhang Zhang, but Tianwang Bushandan calms the spirit, nourishes the heart, and it quiets things down so the sleep becomes more restful and they go out of their brain, and the Shen resides in the heart and the liver at night for dreaming and sleeping. These are my patients who are corporate lawyers. They never reboot. They never turn it off. And so Tianwang Bushandan brings their Shen back in. So Tian Ma Gotang Yin is anchoring the liver, extinguishing wind, and anchoring the yang. But Tianwang Bushandan has this beautiful gift to the Shen for those sort of like type A overworking migraine patients. Okay. Somebody just shared in a private chat, Tian Ma makes my migraines worse. Well, yeah, right? Because this is Chinese medicine. And so what does Tian Ma do? It extinguishes wind, and it anchors the yang. What if somebody is having like an emptiness or deficiency of qi and yin and yang migraine? What if somebody's having a migraine where all the yang is sort of shooting out of their head and they're going like, and they're getting, an empty, it's like a feeling of emptiness in their head, a feeling of like absence, a feeling of gone. You would make it worse with Tian Ma. So Yeah, we always want to be looking at what's the cause for the patient. Is the cause overwork? Can we interact with that? Is the cause not being able to unplug for sleep? Can we do sleep hygiene and nourish yin and calm the shen, calm the heart, and create deep, deep restoration and a deep, deep reboot that you only get when you get into those really deep theta waves and really get into dream, really get into sleep. Okay. Or do we have to nourish this patient's qi and yang? I got into a really extended fight with my mentor one time about Do 20 and whether you can use Do 20 for a headache. And he said that Do 20 is terrible for a headache because it brings up the yang. But my understanding of Do 20 is that it regulates yang. It regulates the up and down nature of yang, the clear yang rising and the liver yang being anchored. And that Do 20 and liver 2, for example, create, it depends on the needling, right? Depends on what other, I'm not going to do 20 only for a headache. That's a way to give someone a headache, send them home with just Do 20 in, which one of our students did in the student clinic one time. That patient got a headache and she called up. So what do we do with that headache? We instruct her how to take Do 20 needle out. And then we find out if she has any magnesium oil at home to rub on kidney 1, give herself a little foot massage, maybe do a warm foot bath, magnesium soak or Epsom salt soak, and the yang returns, so we can always correct it, no big deal. But we always want to be looking at what's causing the problem for the patient. It's not like there's a migraine formula. My clinical pearl is, oh my gosh, Banja Baju Tianma, but it's not for everybody. I have a corporate lawyer right now who is Tianma Goteng Yin, has helped. She hasn't had any headaches since she started taking it, but she's a blood and yin deficient person who overworks. So that's what we're working on with her. Yeah, needle posteriorly on Do 20 to direct the qi downward or for high blood pressure, and forward to raise the yang. We always want to be looking at the direction of the channel. The direction of the Do channel is up, up and over. Do we want to be sending it back down or do we want to be bringing it up? Absolutely. That's true of everything. It's true of liver channel. Are you trying to anchor the liver yang? Or are you trying to course the liver qi? Do you want to move energy along the channel or do you want to anchor it? You should certainly look at your directionality. What are you doing when you put a needle in? Are you doing liver 3 for headache? No, I hope not. You're grounding the liver energy into its source so that its regulation of flow is anchored and orderly and rooted like a tree. Beautiful. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about, we skipped ahead here just a little bit. I want to say for headache, there is a great evergreen formula. I don't know if any of you use it. Corey Dallin. Put that in the chat for you. Constance, explain again why not liver 3. I'm sorry, let me say that again. Always needle liver 3. Liver 3 is a point that I do every single day. It's amazing. It's the source point of the liver channel. We use it all the time. But we're not using liver 3 because it treats X or Y. Liver 3 for headache. We're needling liver 3. When you, the acupuncturist, are putting a needle in liver 3, you are thinking in your mind, I'm stimulating the energy of liver 3 so that the wood element, the way this person is wood, the way this person's energy expression expresses wood element is rooted and grounded and orderly. And as it arises up and out, it doesn't come flying up out of the ground and topple over. The liver energy, the gallbladder energy, the wood energy is about being rooted and orderly movement. Liver regulates the flow of qi. Does that mean go, 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 push, push, push? Well, for too many of us, it does. For too many of us, our livers are kind of out of order. And for many of my patients, I work in downtown Milwaukee, I treat a lot of corporate lawyers on their break. And they're like, they walk into my office on their phone, they walk out of their office on their phone. And so their liver energy is all over the place. Why would you become a lawyer in the first place? You probably have really good liver energy. You're ambitious. Yeah. You got a lot of metal energy, you're black and white, right and wrong. You're going to have a lot of liver, you're going to have a lot of metal. But can you push your wood element to where it's all yang and no yin? You know, there's a yin component to wood, which is rootedness. I have a 20-story tree in my backyard. I really want it to be rooted. It provides a lot of shade that way. It drops a lot of little acorns that way. It provides a home to a lot of animals that way when it's rooted and grounded. And the sap runs in an orderly way, and the leaves come in an orderly way, and they drop in an orderly way. That liver energy. So if somebody's got a headache because they're a corporate lawyer and they're freaking out all the time, they're screaming at people on the phone and they're doing deals. Yeah, I do want to course that energy. I might want it to come up and over and come down and be rooted and anchored. Or I might want it to flow more smoothly. But I'm just saying it's not this or that. It's not Bansha does this, liver 3 does that. It's about what are we trying to accomplish in this patient with this strategy? You know, how do we decide between liver 3 and liver 2? A lot of it's personal choice. Liver 2 clears a little bit more heat, right? Liver 2 is a little bit more down. Liver 3 is the source of liver. So it's getting at the content of the wood element and its soul. So I like that. Yeah, I respond to that. Oh, Tina, thanks for the Corydalin explanation. Corydalin is a great formula for somebody who gets migraines or gets any kind of headache, and they have to take painkillers for it. And they want to do something else, you know. So if you can get a dose of Corydalin into somebody right at the very beginning of their headache, they might not need to take their Advil PM or whatever. And they might, you know, they might. Sometimes with my migraine patients, they go down to like 3 migraines a year. You know, they were getting 3 migraines a week. Some of them go to 0 and they just don't get migraines anymore. And some of them get like a couple migraines a year, but they have to do, everything has to be in place, like every trigger. The barometer is falling and they flew on an airplane and they got given the non-gluten-free roll by accident. And like there has to be a bunch of things go, and they're dehydrated and they haven't eaten. You know, so with headache, with migraine headache, it's really typically, think of migraines like a plane waiting to take off. That 10, you need to get 10 points for a migraine to start. And so what you're looking at is like, didn't get a good night's sleep, might be 2 points. Dehydrated might be 3 points. Barometer drops might be 5 points. Now they've got a migraine. But typically you need a couple things to be in place. Some migraine people have one thing that's worth 10 points and they'll get a migraine every time. Thank you, Tina. Oh, thank you so much. And so like I have a patient who, when she's on an airplane and they're waiting to take off and there's that smell of jet fuel comes in the airplane, she gets a migraine. There's no way for her to not. It's like she's allergic to jet fuel and she gets a migraine. And so there's not a ton I can do for her except make sure she's rested, make sure she's drunk a lot of water, and make sure she has herbs and whatever she needs to deal with her migraine on that plane if she has to take a plane. But for most people, there's a bunch of different things. And it's like you're ovulating, you're dehydrated, you're stressed out, and you slept funny and your neck hurts. So we try to go through and like turn off as many of those layers as we possibly can. So for headache, the chronic versus flare idea, I usually have people taking Bansha Baiju Tiamatang for a longer term, like months. I have some patients on it for years because they're not willing to stop taking it because they haven't had a migraine. I have a patient who hasn't had a migraine in 3.5 years. And she takes a very low dose of Bansha Baiju Tiamatang, and then she'll up her dosage a little bit if she's going to be doing something that pushes it. Okay. She still gets the occasional headache, but she doesn't get migraines anymore. All right. And then sometimes like with her, she overworks. She's riding a century bike ride today. It's a 100-mile bike ride. She has 3 jobs and she started doing extreme sports and she's 51 years old. So I talked to her yesterday about like, is there any way you would consider just not riding your bike 100 miles tomorrow and just like lying around and cheering on the people who are doing it and just not doing it? And she said, no, but this is the last ride of the season and I'm really rethinking what my fall and winter fitness is going to be. And I don't think I need to be doing this all the time anymore. So I think that'll be helpful going forward. We're just going to finish up this slide. I do want to spend some time with it and then we'll take another break. If everybody's feeling like your brain's still working, you're not dying. Okay. Classic, chronic versus flare condition, herpes. Always make sure you know what someone's herpes status is because it's important. And I want to bring COVID up again because people started talking about COVID like, oh my gosh, long haul COVID, what is this? Holy smokes. As if we haven't all been treating long haul viruses for our entire careers, like Lyme's or like mono or like herpes. So herpes has a bunch of different stages. There's the acute flare. And that's when I like to use, for most patients, I like to use Longdan Xiegantang for the acute flare. Longdan Xiegantang, and Tina, if you're still here, I know that Evergreen has what is it? Yeah, Longdan is great for the acute. Evergreen also has one that's based on Longdan Xiegantang. I can't remember what it's called, but it's really great. Dermatrol is really great for shingles, which is a kind of herpes. Shingles is the the topical expression of the herpes virus, right? But for genital herpes, I'm talking about more, but this is actually Gentian complex. Thank you, Gentiana. Yes. Okay, I forget words. It's very difficult to teach an herb seminar when you can't remember words. Okay, so when you're treating herpes, whether it's genital herpes, whether it's cold sores, or whether it's zoster and shingles, really, really great acute presentation. I do like Dermatrol for the acute presentation of shingles. I use Longdan Xiegantang also for the acute presentation of genital herpes and for mouth sores. If somebody has recently contracted herpes, I try to do a course of Chao Chai Hu Tang. Chao Chai Hu Tang is the guiding formula. It's so important. Guiding formula for somebody who has a long haul virus of any kind lodged in the Shaoyang, which is where they get lodged. So herpes is the classic, gets lodged in the Shaoyang, and then expresses where? Pelvic floor, the genitals, that's liver channel, and the hypochondrium, liver gallbladder. So this is a Shaoyang liver gallbladder presentation. Chao Chai Hu Tang is so great because you have Chai Hu to clear the liver. You have Huang Qin, which is an amazing antiviral. You have Ren Chen to tonify the qi. And you're really doing this beautiful, balanced harmonizing of the Shaoyang. And for a lot of people, you can clear significantly, substantially. You can, if they're in their first contraction of herpes, using Longdan Xiegantang when they have the acute sores, but once the sores go down, doing a couple months of Chao Chai Hu Tang to really try to clear as much of that viral load as you possibly can from the Shaoyang. And then once you've done that, if they haven't had an outbreak in a while, they always want to have Longdan Xiegantang on hand for an outbreak. But then you want to see, I use Buzhang Yiqitang a lot for the third stage of it, which is really, really building up the immune system so that any little bit of viral load that might still be somewhere in the Shaoyang or somewhere lingering in their body is the immune system is nourished. So Buzhang Yiqitang is the guiding formula because if you think about herpes, what happens is people get, when they have a flare, they've usually gotten fatigued or they've had some kind of big hit to their immune system, like getting COVID. So I have a patient right now who just started getting shingles attacks after COVID because the COVID did such a number on her immune system that now the immune system isn't good enough to keep the shingles flare in place. So I have her taking Chao Chai Hu Tang to try to harmonize both the COVID and also the shingles. And she is also going through perimenopause. And that is not helpful. Menopause and perimenopause are not helpful when we're trying to make something be latent again. I learned this from Jeffrey Yuen, I think my first year of clinical practice, and I had no idea what he was talking about. And I literally figured out what he was talking about yesterday. So I was treating this patient who took me 20 years, but I got it. I'd love to tell Jeffrey Yuen, thank you. I finally understand one thing he was talking about. He's so advanced and he's such a genius. When you have a pathology that's latent and the body is suppressing it and keeping it latent, it's using Jing to suppress it. The deepest level of the immune system is the Jing, kidney essence. Really interestingly, when do we start to see shingles coming up? After age 55. You know, what's happening then? Blood stasis, sure, yeah. But the Jing is wearing down. And perimenopause and menopause itself are expressions of the waning, declining Jing. So it's sort of like draining the swamp, right? You see all the monsters that are in the swamp if you drain the swamp. And so as our Jing starts to go down, we start to see like, oh, my body has been suppressing herpes in the Shaoyang, but with Jing, with kidney essence. So in my older patients, if I start to have a patient who's in their 60s and out of nowhere, they're starting to have genital herpes flares again, I very often will add an essence formula like Zuo Guiwan or Yo Guiwan. Question, do you give digestives with Longdan Shegan Tang if they're vulnerable to bitter cold herbs? It's a great question. The first thing about it that I want to say is, in comparison to most things that people in the West are doing to their spleens, Longdan Shegan Tang isn't that cold. You know, in comparison to a slushy, a Slurpee, in comparison to antibiotics, in comparison to ice water. Yeah, Florentine, exactly. Taking it with ginger tea can go a long way. Also, I'm talking about Longdan Shegan Tang for a flare. So it should be 3 to 7 days. You know, you shouldn't be seeing a flare that's going on a lot longer than that. We should be able to get it into check with herbs and acupuncture pretty quickly. So we don't want it. You don't be afraid of Longdan Shegan Tang. It is to clear a fire that is expressing as an eruptive canker sore exploding out of someone's pelvic floor. Be cold for a minute, like get in there, you know. I kind of like to clean up the spleen after, and that's a lot what the Bujang Yiqi Tang was for. So if we go back a minute, somebody who was exposed to herpes 10 years ago, and they're doing pretty well, everything is going fine, but then they get a little bit overworked, they work some late hours, maybe they have a few pizza a few nights because they're working through dinner, and their qi just droops a little bit, and then damp heat starts to brew in the lower jiao, and then boom, it expresses as a herpes rash. That oftentimes has, by its nature, a sinking spleen aspect to it. So for a lot of patients, giving them a little ginger tea is great. And for a lot of patients, you're going to have to do significant work building their spleen back up so that they're strong enough to not get the future attack. That's a really big thing of chronic versus flare. And we're going to get to that after the next break too, because I'm going to talk about some seasonal stuff. One of the things that I'm always trying to do when I'm working with a chronic flaring thing is I'm trying to prevent the next flare permanently. I'm trying to prevent it forever. So that's why herpes is an interesting example, because you have the acute attack, which is the sore, and that's Longdan Shegan Tang. And then it goes away, and you have the like, hey, have we ever really tried to clear this virus from you altogether? Cha Chai Hu Tang. I also like Herbal AVR is a great formula that Evergreen has. Herbal AVR, I use tons and tons of Herbal AVR, especially all throughout this pandemic that we're in. And really trying to clear a viral load from somebody. And then once I feel like, okay, we've significantly cleared load, we've worked this for 2 months, then I start to see what's left. Are they yin deficient? Are they qi deficient? I will very often go to either Bujang Yiqi Tang or like an Immune Plus so that I'm nourishing the righteous qi. Okay. Preventing that drooping down, the generating of damp that generates damp heat. Yeah, Dermatrol HZ is for herpes zoster. Really good. Okay. All right. Let's actually take a break now. We're a little bit overdue for a break, and I don't want to give short shrift to IBS and anxiety. These are things that we see all the time, that I see all the time, and I really want to spend some time with them. So it is 32. So let's take 10 and come back at 42. Donna's saying that. 10:42 Pacific, 12:42 Midwest. Okay.
Recording stopped.
Hello, hello. Welcome back from break. I hope you're finding today's webinar fun and also helpful for your practice. The best part of attending so many webinars is meeting seasoned practitioners who are generous with sharing their expertise. Their selfless act of kindness will always be preserved in our eLotus library. A question for you. When you first graduated, did you feel you were tossed into the wild and had no support and maybe no one to turn to for help when you encounter cases that you had no idea to treat? And for those of you who have been practicing for a long time, do you find using the same points for back pain pretty boring and maybe you want to learn something new? If you answered yes to either of the questions, please type that into the chat room. So I feel there are two essential parts in having a successful practice. There are the hard skills, and then there are the soft skills. The hard skills include your treatment skills, your herb knowledge, diagnostic skills, acupuncture skills, tuina, herbal prescription, etc. This may take years to refine if you're figuring it out on your own. Plus, you'll need the patient load in order to validate treatment efficacy. And the soft skills, what's that? This is your PR skills, your people skills, bedside manners, your sales skills, marketing skills, and talking with patients, making them feel comfortable, how to retain patients, knowing when to ask them to come back for another visit or interest them in a care plan. So the bottom line is that you have to invest in yourself to build towards your ideal practice. So today you are exactly where you are supposed to be. And in this moment is your invitation to a membership that will change your practice forever. You will train with seasoned practitioners with many years of clinical success. They've done all the work to figure out how to systemize results, and all for your benefit. You'll be saving decades of study and be on the fast track to become the practitioner you are meant to be with any specialty you want to learn. Learning from others' experience is the much faster road to success than learning everything on your own with no help. Do you agree? How many of you are interested in improving your hard skills? This is refining your acupuncture technique, learning how to prescribe herbs, or improving your diagnostic skills. And how many of you are interested in improving your soft skills? Again, this is your social skills, which include bedside manners, marketing, PR, etc. And how many of you would be interested in joining a collective in which you only learn from verified experts in our field? The best instructors to teach Master Dong, the balance method, pulse diagnosis, auricular medicine, herbal medicine, functional medicine, herb-drug interaction, Japanese acupuncture, abdominal acupuncture, Korean hand acupuncture, practice management, etc. And then on top of that, how many would be interested in getting additional support from TCM vendors like acupuncture supply companies and herb companies? They would give you resources to help your practice thrive. If you said yes to either question, what do you think about having a membership where you can access over 3,000 CE hours and learn from over 200 speakers? Well, I'd like to introduce you to the path of your dream practice, which is the Gold Pass. It's an annual membership to our eLotus online platform where you can learn everything I previously mentioned. The regular price is $1,500, but today we are pricing it at $999, special for our webinar attendees this weekend. For those of you who feel it's a good time to invest in yourself and be closer to the practice of your dreams, our sponsor Helio will offer you 10% off all your needle purchases. And our other sponsor, Evergreen Herbs, will match with an herbal voucher for their collection formula line for $999. Let me put the link up for you into the chat room so that you can read more before you decide. This means not only do you get your tuition back in herbs, you can actually resell them and make money. If there are any Gold Pass members today, please share with your colleagues what you think of the Gold Pass. Is it worth the investment? How has it transformed your practice? Are there any questions for the Gold Pass? If yes, please type them into the chat room, and I'm happy to help answer any questions that you may have now as we move forward and continue with the class.
Recording in progress.
Okay, Dr. Murray, go ahead when you are ready. Are you able to reshare your PowerPoint again, please?
Okay. Okay. Are we back?
Thank you. Yep.